More accountability for National Grid. Lieutenant Governor thinks we should have that.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
Easy for me to say, Philly Wabbit. Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee is here tonight. Sorry, how's everybody? Good. It's just starting to get frigid right now, right? 7:30 and/or midnight. All you have to do is take a look at what was going on in the Midwest today to know that tomorrow we'll have remnants of that freezing cold. Just make sure you don't mess around with it. Frostbite is something that you do not want to play with. Hypothermia, same thing. Checking on your neighbors. Cross your fingers that there's no gas valve issues between one company and the next or anything else going on out there. It looks like it's probably not quite as cold as some of the days that we had a week ago for us. But you know, be aware, be smart, give yourself some extra time, icing, all that kind of thing. All right, yes, we'll get to Lieutenant Governor. He's got some really, I think, compelling thoughts on holding National Grid accountable legislatively, like Massachusetts does. Another one of those things on the checklist that Rhode Island just probably ought to copy our neighbors. In the meantime, let's take a look at the national scene for just a second. This is incredible. This headline just typifies the dynamics of this president in the White House. And we had intel chiefs testifying to Congress about the legitimate issues in Syria, the need for troops to remain there, the need for us to keep the pressure on terror, ISIS specifically. And this president is already on record suggesting that it may be time to pull out, that more or less the ISIS crowd there has been defeated, and he's belied by the people who actually are hired to give him that information. It is uncanny. And then, of course, he goes to the phone and social media and tweets out this kind of stuff. The intelligence people seem to be extremely passive and naive when it comes to the dangers of Iran. They're wrong. When I became president, Iran was making trouble all over the Middle East and beyond. Since ending the terrible Iran nuclear deal, they're much different, but a source of potential danger and conflict. They're testing rockets. Anyway, the idea at the bottom that intel should go back to school, I just don't even know what to make of that. I don't even know if America knows what to make of that. I ask those of you who include yourself in the base to ask yourselves, what is it that commits you to the leadership of this president when he goes off on his own, unstudied, and from the gut suggests that Iran is in a much different place than intel suggests, and that Syria and ISIS are, more or less yesterday's news. Woo. Anyway, coming home here, this is predictable. DCYF has had a real, a tough run here in the last few weeks with the death of this poor young little girl. It's just terrible. Do we have a headline here? I think we do, right? The union there is considering a no confidence vote against the director, who came out by herself a couple of weeks ago to take responsibility and accountability for this. And she did talk about 4 employees, each of whom were disciplined in different ways. And the union is suggesting that they may go no confidence because they feel like the union employees have been thrown under the bus. These are very difficult things for the general public to digest and figure out, right? Because they're internal organizational issues. It's a tragedy. The governor more or less suggested that the director had it under control and decided not even to show up and support the concept that she was in touch with the minute details. I find it really interesting. The governor was able, during the national grid crisis, to talk about the minute details as to what little school here and what little program there was available to be able to service the community. Really kind of usurping the Newport mayor's responsibilities there, trying to kind of own every little thing. But she doesn't have to own every little thing when it comes to the loss of life of a 9-year-old, formerly in the custody of DCYF, and allowed to be adopted by a woman who clearly was not capable of doing so. That's where the oversight, that's where the third-party evaluation of DCYF needs to happen. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to tell who's wrong too within the organization. And by the way, that should be the last consideration. The first consideration ought to be the safety of our children in this state. Big deal at the State House yesterday, abortion bills hearing. The fight has resurrected itself because of the worry about the U.S. Supreme Court. Here's the Eyewitness News coverage of it yesterday.
Competing chants of the words life and choice at the Rhode Island State House as hundreds pack the building for a judiciary hearing on multiple abortion bills. The most high-profile people are supporting and opposing is the Reproductive Health Care Act, which would codify abortion rights into Rhode Island law. The lead sponsor is Representative Edith Agello.
The bill repeals all and parts of statutes that are still on the books that have been found to be unconstitutional.
She says 39 of the chamber's 75 members co-sponsor the bill. That's already a majority. The question is whether House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello allows the bill to come to the floor.
I certainly think he should. I think that the writing's on the wall. People want this to get done.
We're here because we stand for human life at all stages.
Carol Owens with the Diocese of Providence prayed with other Catholics outside the State House before the hearing, hoping abortion is not legalized in Rhode Island law.
It's an agenda that is just out to destroy human life.
You know, this is really about a codification of the concepts of Roe v. Wade in Rhode Island. If we didn't have this I think false, but certain out there concern about the U.S. Supreme Court and the balance of that power shifting back to the states, the decision on abortion, I don't think we would have this kind of a battle. We want to clean up old legislation, right? We always want to do that and make it more modern. But this, of course, is the social sticky wicket of the century. For the House Speaker to decide not to put this bill or these bills on the floor would be tough. I think the only thing that he could do to stymie this is to say that let's wait for the Supreme Court's moves and maybe we'll address it then. It's a divider, and it feels sometimes like nobody wins in this conversation. Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee is here to talk primarily about the National Grid situation, but what do you think about this?
So I put a letter of support to codify federal law and our state law, and you know, there is a movement, whether side of position you are on the issue nationally, to put pressure on the Supreme Court. Iowa has passed legislation that has been shot down in their local courts, but their goal is to get it to the Supreme Court. Texas has put in legislation that really is restrictive on the abortion issue, and their goal, again, is to get the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court not hear the case stand. So if you're familiar with what's happening in other states, there is a clear move to try to take the new Supreme Court, you know, Trump's Supreme Court, with his two last nominees that are on the court, and they're trying to make a move there. So I think it's real. The argument is certainly a lot more real than it was a few years ago, and I think that it makes sense to codify and match it up. Choice is an interesting word, right? Churches still have the ability to inform their congregations of what their positions are, and their congregations have a ability to follow those teachings or not. So I think the codifying that legislation, the time has come, as the Rep. said, Agello said there.
What do you think the Speaker's going to do?
I don't know, but I think
it will highlight not only, not to interrupt you, but
yeah,
it will highlight not only his position on the issue itself, but it'll bring a bright light to the power of the Speaker, that when there's a lot of momentum for at least something to debate it and voted on, that he says, nah, not interested. That's going to be tough for him.
So, I mean, the issues are totally different, but I hope that, my letter said, let's do it quickly. Let's get it to a vote as quickly as we can in the beginning of this session, so that you put that behind you, where we debated marriage equality for a whole session, and we didn't, pay attention to some of the other things that are really important. So let's do it quick. Let's put the decision out there, let everybody vote the way they want to vote, and then move on.
All right, a real quick headline here on the National Grid situation. The Lieutenant Governor has actually put out this press release. You can see he's trying to take action to improve emergency response National Grid. Don't give me the 30-second executive summary, then we'll dig into it when we come back.
So the 30-second is that Massachusetts has legislation that was supported by Supreme Court decisions that they can impose penalties on their utilities when they are not responsive or not prepared when energy gets turned off or you know, they lose energy in Massachusetts. Rhode Island doesn't have that legislation. We need to protect the ratepayers and not continue to protect the shareholders as we've been doing in the state of Rhode Island.
All right, we'll dig into how this might work and what's been going on in terms of some of the response on the gas crisis, which has now been quelled. Be right back.
I'm announcing the creation of $1.5 million, $1.45 million emergency loan fund for small businesses directly affected by the gas outage on Aquidneck Island. The fund will offer emergency loans of up to $25,000 with no payment and no interest for the first 6 months.
All right, so that was the governor's response. What's your quick thought on that?
I think that's good. I think that, you know, I think that getting loans out to people, I think the governor did the right thing there, but it's a small piece. I mean, if it's $25,000 caps, if you support 60 businesses, there's a lot more than 60 businesses down there right now that are hurting and should be taken care of, and that's why we're working on the National Grid issues.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about the legislation that you're looking for, but just to lay out some of what's going on here, National Grid, 3 hours after that press conference a few days ago, had their own announcement. We covered it.
This is meant to be kind of a bridge loan so you can stay in business while you wait for those reimbursements.
Separately, National Grid announced $500,000 in grants for small businesses where the gas was shut off.
Local businesses are critical to any economy.
The grants are need-based, up to $5,000 per business.
And we don't intend to take the place of customers' insurance providers, so it's important that folks pursue those channels to make their claims. But this program is really built to fill the gap. Okay, so this is a grant program. It's $5,000 cap, $500,000. I did a little fuzzy math on the radio the other day, but I finally came up with a number. That's 100 businesses at maximum. What's your thought about that?
Well, I think goodwill is important, and the National Grid has had earned a great deal of goodwill, but we need to go beyond that. So, you know, my feeling is that if there's, find out how many companies need help, divide it by that number, and then give the grants out to every company that applies that has lost energy.
Well, so you're not only a former mayor and now lieutenant governor for a second term. You're a businessman as well. I think you understand the difference between a grant and a loan, right?
Absolutely.
A grant is something you don't have to pay back. Grants are better. Loans are more difficult. And so I asked this organization called LISC, L-I-S-C, Rhode Island. This is the nonprofit that National Grid has hired to administer the $500,000 they're putting into this grant program. And I asked, chicken or the egg, how do you work this whole thing out if you're a small business? Listen.
They borrowed $5, and all of a sudden they realized they could have received $5 with no payback. Maybe they want to supplant that first $5 with your $5. Is that still something that you'll calculate and consider?
I don't have that answer at the moment. I don't know. I mean, I think that that's a difficult question, and I think we have to really see what the need is. I mean, if somebody has already secured resources to assist them, certainly a grant is better than a loan, but to kind of circle back around and help them pay off the loan, I don't know if that's going to be one of the allowable options.
Okay, now
so we'll have to look at that. It's a good question.
You had a good question.
I don't have a good answer yet.
My answer would be take applications for any business that's down in Newport that lost their gas and lost business, and then take that number, divide it by the goodwill of the $500,000 grant, and then issue those out to each business that qualifies.
The thing is that
otherwise you're going to have businesses that are not going to qualify. And to make a loan application where they have to, these businesses are hurting. And so when they're going to go for loans, and that shouldn't disqualify them from a grant.
Right. So, and especially since it seemed chronologically that the governor's plan, to their credit, was going to be more readily available, and disbursements were possible within 2 or 3 working days, maybe even as early as today. the National Grid program needed at least a week to get up on the website and all this kind of stuff. And so if you'd borrowed some money, but then learned that, you know, $5,000 is available on a no payback basis, and then you're told, sorry, you already borrowed money, you can't have the grant. You know, there's a word I'd use, I can't use it on television, but I call on that, right? And that's going to infuriate people.
Yeah. On the grants, you can determine who would qualify for the grant. Anybody would qualify for the grant. You should just divide it up equally and figure that's a lot of goodwill, and the business would appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. When we come back, we're going to dig in a little deeper on what the Lieutenant Governor is proposing now for the second time. Stay with us. So this didn't take long. Residents, businesses filed class action lawsuits. Attorney Brian Kuna has the case. I don't know how many other lawyers may or may not be involved in that. He's a guest on the program tomorrow, and I would think, Lieutenant Governor, that might be based on a little bit of your experience talking to businesses down there. That's probably legal fertile ground, right?
Yeah, and I was told that when I visited down there on Friday with the Chamber Executive Director, Jamie Bova, who's done a great job as the mayor, acting mayor down there, and the council, and Lynn Segley, that as we toured the businesses, that was certainly in the discussions as people coming by for lunch, cold lunches at these restaurants that have to improvise, right? Because they can't cook, they can't wash their glasses, they're really suffering. So, yeah, that discussion definitely surfaced.
Okay, look, you think by and large National Grid has been an okay actor in this, right? You're not indicting National Grid specifically.
No, in fact, I've said publicly that we need to have good relationships with our utilities, including the National Grid. I did that as a mayor. I certainly don't want to have poor relationships with them, but the state regulates our utilities. They're not a partner of ours. They should be regulated. That's what Massachusetts has done. And right now, the lobbying that goes on behalf of the National Grid statewide is lobbying on behalf of the shareholders. And what we should be doing through our regulation is lobbying and protecting the ratepayers.
Right. Massachusetts passed legislation a little while back. I have a headline here that reflects it, that allowed for fines for National Grid for what? Non-compliance, for penalties for breakdowns like we experienced in Newport? Tell me about it.
Penalties could be imposed if, say, you're not prepared and you cause the shutdown, and then penalties could be imposed after the shutoffs or the loss of power that you didn't act quickly enough to get the people back.
And who determines that?
That's done by the Public Utility Commission, the version of the Massachusetts Public Utility Commission, supported by the Attorney General's office in Massachusetts, and they've been very aggressive in making sure that the penalties, Dan, that are imposed, and we're approaching almost $30 million of penalties. And the Supreme Court was brought to the utility company, brought that law to the Supreme Court, which was upheld. And the language in their legislation says that the penalties would come out of the shareholders' pockets, not the ratepayers, and that the monies that would be collected through those penalties would be credited back to the customer base that's impacted. It's a good law based on what happened in 2017 in businesses and people we walked through when we had a major shutdown in the fall of 2017. We started doing research. What could you do? We presented that statute last year. It got a hearing, didn't get out of committee. But what's happening in Newport right now is a good refresher of why we need to, protect the ratepayers.
You feel like the Public Utilities Commission did an honest, transparent, and objective review of the 2017 situation?
I do. In fact, that was a report that was pretty critical, very critical, of the National Grid's preparation for, and comment leading into that shutdown and their response. Just one example in that report said that they criticized the grid for sending out 600 service calls to customers that had already had their electricity restored during that storm, and that means that those 600 should have went to the thousands of people that they were waiting on, that they spent several days getting back online in electricity.
What evidence do we have that the grid has been responsive to that report without another massive loss of electricity or a shutdown like that? In other words, you get the report, but until you have another emergency response, you don't know whether they've learned their lessons. Or is there something interimly that can be identified operationally that indicates that they have?
Well, I think the reports do help change behavior. You're seeing a lot more people on the ground. Remember, we waited several days in that 2017 for bring people from out of state to help service those thousands of accounts that were out of electricity. So there are measurable
and to their credit,
things.
In the Newport situation, they had as many as 1,000 people on the ground.
And when I was there, I was back on Saturday meeting with a core group of business owners on Saturday at Sedella's restaurant, the former mayor of Newport as well. And then when we went around walked the neighborhood, oh yeah, there was a police officer, a National Guard person, and someone that's from the gas company.
With this gas situation in the Newport, I've never criticized the grid. It seems like they made a safety decision in shutting down a little bit of Middletown and most of Newport. And what we're not talking about here is loss of life, explosions, yes, whatever else could have occurred. So no one ought to criticize them for that. Who's responsible for this and what actually happened between Algonquin, the supplier, and the grid is still to be analyzed and determined. I think that their public relations efforts are not nearly as sophisticated as their technical operations. To this day, I don't have an answer as to when the specific reimbursement will happen for the homeowners who took hotels based on a damn near order from the governor to do so. That's got to be included in the review, don't you think?
Of course, and we know that people are putting those charges on their credit card. Some are very capable of paying them when they're due, and some of them will be struggling. You know, those were expenses they weren't counting on, so, and they'll incur penalties. But we should be past the time frame where we depend on the national grid's goodwill, right? We should be putting in, just like Massachusetts has, hold our utility companies accountable in a way where they can be penalized if in fact they either were the cause of the shutdown or not responding properly.
30 seconds.
And keep the goodwill in there. We want to keep the goodwill in there.
What's your confidence that the Speaker will get this bill heard? The lobby effort up there, I'm sure, is strangling.
I'll put it in summary. The lobbies on behalf of the shareholders, right? We're lobbying on behalf of the ratepayers. We'll see who wins out on this one.
Well, there you go. That sets it up. Appreciate your thoughts. Final word when we come back. So you've got the goodwill of National Grid at $500,000. You've got the, I guess, goodwill of the taxpayers combined with Bank Newport and the Rhode Island Foundation for a loan program. And something tells me that it won't be near enough to satisfy the business losses that insurance may or may not cover for businesses in Newport. And so that's where lawyers come in, right? And litigation ensues. And so we'll have the lawyer who is working, at least what we see is the first class action lawsuit, here tomorrow on the program. In the meantime, we'll see you at 3 on the radio, or talk to you on the radio at 3 tomorrow until 6 on WPRO. Thanks for checking in.